Welcome back to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office that reminds you that drunk driving is the ultimate form of unsportsmanlike conduct. Fans, don't let fans drive drunk. Tim Rogers out of WBFG, West Tennessee. Tim, weather was really something this weekend. I know y'all got it probably worse than we got it in Middle Tennessee, and we got a ton of it here. A lot of rain. Games on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I don't know how many you got a chance to see, but I know one of them that you covered, you said is your game of the week, was Covington and Haywood.
We knew that was probably going to be a really good game because, of course, Covington has had some excellent seasons recently, and of course Haywood has too. But we were looking to see how Haywood would bounce back after their loss last week to Henry County, and you never want to start 0-2 out of the gate. But Haywood's the kind of team they can rebound from that because they, they're good. But obviously Covington's good again this year too.
Yeah, Covington in 3A is going to make a lot of noise, and they have been for a while, as you mentioned. Haywood, tough start for them, but they're not out of the woods. The region play hasn't started yet. They're ready to go.
No, and I dare say they played as tough a schedule in the first two games as nearly anybody has.
Even rain couldn't stop Peabody. They win the 25th straight over McNary. Not a close one at all, 37-6.
They're just rolling on, and I mean they've got such a great coaching staff there, and they've just been very fortunate to have lots of good kids the last several years, and looks like that's going to keep on rolling for them.
Anybody out that way give Peabody any shot in 2A?
I'd be surprised if anybody did.
Well, let's talk about Jackson Christian, who hung 70 on Chester County, 104 points total in the football game. That's a lot of turf being chewed up.
It sure was, and of course Chester County's going through a really rough time. They were 0-10 last year, and really weren't even close in any of their games that maybe won. And thought that maybe they could make a decent showing. I guess scoring 34 points is a pretty decent showing.
Yeah, it is.
When you let the other team score 70, that's a different story. So I don't know. Chester County's going through a really down cycle, and I believe Jackson Christian's probably got a pretty good team this year. Not having seen them yet, but just hearing people talk about them around the program.
I'm pretty sure anybody can put 70 on the board can do that, but giving up 34 would be maybe a little bit of a question mark for them. Union City's also going through a down cycle, aren't they? USJ put a big beating on them on this weekend.
Yeah, that game was almost our game of the week too. It was looked at, of course, it was primarily because Union City hadn't played yet, and maybe everybody was kind of the opinion that Union City was going to, be the Union City of the old. But I think there's probably a combination. They're not the Union City of old, and USJ I think is pretty good. Having gone to the state championship game last year in private school, they're going to be knocking on the door again this year, I think.
Right there in your backyard. I don't know whether the game was played at Lexington or not, but they get a big win over Riverside.
Yeah, they played at Riverside, and it was 38-0 with a running clock at the start of the fourth quarter, and Riverside scored with a minute or two left in the game. Lexington just totally dominated both sides of the ball. I watched that game on film or on a live feed Friday night, and it wasn't. Lexington's got a quarterback that's fast. I mean, really fast. Jacob. His last name's Smith. His brother was Jacob. Jordan Smith. And then, of course, they got
the background.
Got the sophomore. That's my wife giving me some help. Yeah, she knows. But anyway, he's very good. I think he gained 150 yards or something. And then, of course, the sophomore running back that showed out last week against South Gibson, he was a little bit quieter this week. He had over 100 yards, but he's still got the potential.
Gibson County loses 44-14 with Westview. What kind of team is Westview going to have?
I believe they're a tremendous offensive team. Of course, y'all know with Ty Simpson, the highly rated quarterback, he just is throwing it around everywhere. I expect he'll set some records this year if they play a full schedule, because I mean he is a talent, a real talent. Of course, we're going to get to see him for 2 more years, just this year and next year around here.
I rambled on a little bit about the weather. Share with us a little bit how the games were played in your neck of the woods. How some moved up, I guess, and some got moved back.
Yeah, a vast majority of the games got moved to Thursday night. We were on the air Thursday night talking about scores and games, And I think all but 4 games in West Tennessee got moved to Thursday night. And then eventually one of the Friday night games got moved to Saturday, and that was Henry County and Beach played at Milan that game. And then there was 5 games in West Tennessee. Well, four got canceled and 1 got rescheduled for week 11. So 4 games got completely wiped out of the schedule.
We're talking with Tim Rogers. Tim, obviously with our affiliate there in West Tennessee in Parker's Crossroads in Lexington. Tim, you know, one of the games that's interesting to me is I think for most folks, obviously in the area, this Hardin County game and Northside this week. You know, I'm going to be interested to see, because obviously, if you know, this being Northside's first ball game, how they're going to end up competing and going to Hardin County, who's just on fire right now.
Yeah, Hardin County's defense is very good, and of course the offense is good too. And I'll tell you what, Hudson Wolf, star player for Hardin County that's committed to UT, he hadn't played yet. So they've won 2 games and him not even playing. He's got a little back tweak that I've been told, but he's probably coming back this week against Northside. But he hadn't played. But you know, last year after they got upset in that first game against McNary, they went on a roll and they had about 6 or 7 shutouts. So it looks like they're trying their best to outdo that this year. But they're very good, and they've got talent in a lot of skill positions.
Liberty Magnet comes to Lexington this week. Preview that one for us.
Well, for years, as y'all know, that was one of the biggest games in West Tennessee. Lexington and Liberty were in the same region back then, 7, 8, 10 years ago, and they battled out every year for the region championship. Recently, though, both teams have been down some. Liberty really down. You know, they went to the state championship, 3 or 4 years ago, and it just seems like after that their coach left, and they have gone downhill. They've got athletes, and I'm sure they're going to be pretty good. I think they have a new coach this year, and so it'll be interesting to see what his philosophy is. The past coaches they've had for about the last 3 years, they've thrown it all around, and they had a lot of turnovers. They have interceptions or dropped snaps from the quarterback out of the shotgun. So it'll be interesting to see what they do this year on that part.
Dresden ekes out a close one over Brewston. They now get the fortune of going to Lake County. Obviously not the same Lake County team that we saw a year ago. Any chance for Dresden in this one?
I would say Lake County is still going to be pretty good. They did lose some guys last year, but I saw their middle school team about 3 years ago, and I thought, this is probably the best middle school team I've ever seen. I mean, they were that big and that athletic and that skilled. So they've got players coming in. As y'all know, Lake County's had a long history of football. They were a powerhouse in the 70s and 80s, and they kind of went through some little down times, but it looks like they may be back. Dresden, I don't know a whole lot about them this year. Their program also very good for the last several years, but not as good recently.
The South Gibson at Milan game this week. Interesting to see how that one goes. Really, you know, Milan had that tough loss in the first week, and it's a Milan team that had a lot of high hopes coming into the season. Obviously, all of those things are still in front of them, but South Gibson this week.
Right. Yeah, that was a tough loss because of that Trenton game. I think Milan opening up their new revamped stadium was expecting that game to be closer than that. It was close for a while, then Trenton just pulled away in the second half. And of course, as y'all know, those two schools are about 7 miles apart from each other, if they're even that much. And even though South Gibson is a relatively new school, those two places have developed a real rivalry with each other because they compete for a lot of the same players. And so South Gibson bounced back from their loss to Lexington and won big this week against TCA. But I don't know if that says something about TCA or says something about South Gibson, the way they played the first game of the season. So I do expect that to be a good game simply because it's bragging rights.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, one we want to get to Henry County at Dyer County. A good bit on the line in this one.
Absolutely. If you'd asked this question 5, 10 years ago, there wouldn't even been a question. Henry County would have been hands down the undisputed favorite by several touchdowns. But Dyer County has really revamped their program, and they upset Henry County last year, and I think in the playoffs after Henry County beat them in the regular season. So this may be the West Tennessee game of the week.
I think it may very well be as well, especially with Henry County playing Beach last week in such a great ball game. Really puts them up there in the discussion for top team in the state. He is Tim Rogers with our affiliate and WFG and Parker's Crossroads. Appreciate him taking the time. We're going to take a quick break, come back with more. You're listening to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office.
Welcome back to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office. To remind you to designate a sober game plan. If you've been drinking, don't drive. Fans don't let fans drive drunk. Headed down to Chattanooga. Chattanooga Times Free Press writer Stephen Hargis with us, as he's been many, many times. Stephen, Chattanooga had the same thing we had all over the state, I guess. Some weather that changed some games around on Thursday, Friday, maybe even Saturday.
Yeah, guys, we had probably close to half our games moved up from Friday to Thursday, but they were able to get all of them in. We had one that was moved all the way back to Saturday, but they played it yesterday evening and got everything in. Good to go now.
Game that I put down as my number one game, at least looking at it coming in, was state runner-ups last year, Meigs County and Greenback, but it's not much of a contest. Meigs County really good on both sides of football, really hung it on them.
Yeah, Meigs County, it seemed like they just have more back than what Greenback has coming off last year's teams, and so that made a huge difference. Meigs has got quite a bit up front that's returning from last year, and I think that made all the difference. I think they pretty much blitzed Greenback quite a bit, and the Cherokees had a hard time picking up that and moving the ball at all on Meigs County. They're just really physical on both sides of the ball up front.
Tyner gets his win over Central 48-18. Jeremiah Sawyer, 5 touchdowns. If you get 5 TDs, you got a pretty good chance to win, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeremiah's a guy who early on for weeks now leading up to the season had said, watch what I do. I'm healthy this year. Really want to kind of show out. Right before the season started, he picked up an offer from Tennessee State University. I think he's going to get a lot more offers with the season he's in line to have. Tyner can be really good. They don't have a lot of depth. But they've got a lot of returners up front, and Jeremiah could be one of the better, more electric players in our area. He's a physical runner, good blend with speed. Look for big things from him and Tyner this year.
Is there a secret to what Tyner's been able to do to kind of build their program up to where it's at right now?
Wayne Turner just really, he's been there since 1990. Took over the program, and they really hadn't had much success before Wayne got there. And it's really, just a great story. Wayne's just an old school. I mean, if you look up old school coach, and there is Wayne Turner, his photo would be right there for you. Not really what you would expect for an inner city school where he's working with predominantly black kids, and you get this old school white guy. He just connects with those guys, though, in a certain way where they would run through a wall for Wayne. And they really love the style that he teaches them is just be more physical than everybody else. They just wear on people. It's really hard. He loves having those big physical running backs like Jeremiah that just kind of really, by the fourth quarter, 160-pound defensive backs typically are tired of coming up and hitting those guys that are so physical. That's really where he's kind of built his bread and butter, is just be more physical than the other guys. It's been a lot more successful than not.
McCally's got a pretty good running back themselves as they handle Oxweb 55-0.
Yeah, B.J. Harris, kid that's going to go to right now committed to Missouri. He had other offers as well, but B.J. He's someone that really showed last year. He lost some weight last year to help improve his speed. Didn't lose a lot of the physical style that he runs with, but it just made him maybe a step quicker. And he really had a great season last year, helping McCally win a state championship. And now he's going to be, McCally lost. D'Angelo Hardy was an all-state quarterback. They lost him to graduation. So when you do that, someone else has to step up when you've got a couple of inexperienced guys coming in at quarterback. So what they're going to do is they've got pretty much their entire offensive line back from last year. They're going to rely on those guys and BJ and the running game really early on until they figure out which one of the two young quarterbacks is going to step up, or if they're going to shuttle them back and forth a little bit this year. No matter who's taking the snaps, if they've got BJ to hand off to and run behind that offensive line, especially, the Gentle, Jack and Austin Gentle up front, a couple of guys who had offer, Austin had an offer from Texas A&M, but he's elected to commit to Harvard so he can play with his twin brother and go there. And those guys are just really, really physical up front, and having BJ run behind them, that's going to be an awfully tough offense to stop.
Cleveland picks up its first win. They'll head to Maryville this next week. Cleveland, though, a winner over Hardin Valley.
Yeah, Cleveland was my team my pick this year to be kind of the dark horse team in our area that not a lot of people were talking about. It's been a while since Cleveland there in the 90s won back 3 consecutive 4A state championships from 93 through 95. Had a 55-game winning streak, I think it was. For a long time they were kind of the standard, and then just kind of drifted. Like programs do, hit a down cycle and never really have managed to get back up to that. They've gone to playoffs, but never really reached that level where they were in the mid-90s again. But, the talent right now, this year, they've got quite a bit of talent where they can be really dangerous for a lot of folks. And they were my pick to be the dark horse team this year that could really make some noise when people weren't expecting them to. So, Tracy Malone is the offensive coordinator. He's done a great job everywhere he's gone. Marty Wheeler has a great track record as a head coach. I just think there's too much talent and too much experience on the coaching staff for those guys not to be really dangerous.
Talking with Stephen Hargis from the Chattanooga Times Free Press, and Stephen, you wrote a book. I can't remember if it's last year or the year before. They all run together when you've been doing it 20 years like I have, and I know you've been doing it just as long, if not longer. But Marion County, off to a really good start. They had the win over Sequatchie the other night, and that win that was that kind of caught my eye there in week 1 over Fayetteville. Talk about this Marion County team and kind of what you see with them.
Yeah, they're another team that, it starts again up front with them. They've got a lot of experience back, and then they made the coaching change and brought back Dale Pruitt, who, as most folks know, is the father of University of Tennessee head coach Jeremy Pruitt. And Dale was there a handful of years ago and was very successful with Marion County. He's back now, and he's similar to that style that we talked about with Wayne Turner. It's kind of no frills, some wing tee type stuff. They've got a really good runner in Tay Hutchins, who right now is kind of Mr. Electric for them. They've got some other guys coming up who can kind of be those, punch in the nose kind of runners, and Tay's the game breaker for them. And so Marion County, I think them and Tyner, when they lock up here in a few weeks, that could probably be for the Region 3 2A championship, the top seed right there between those two teams. They're very talented. They've got quite a few kids out. There's a lot of enthusiasm around the program again. It wasn't so long ago that they were in consecutive state championship games and finished runner-up just a couple of years ago. And then as all smaller schools do, you kind of hit that down cycle for a little bit, and it might dip for a year or two, but they're coming right back up. I think they look like a 7 or 8 win type team this season with the talent they've got and with what Coach Pruitt's doing with them.
One of the teams that I heard early hype about this year was East Hamilton. So far, so good. They handled Saudi Daisy the night 31-0, and they're on an early roll.
Yeah, and they are. Grant Reynolds is the head coach now in his second year at East Hamilton. And Grant was the head coach and formerly the defensive coordinator, Boyd Buchanan, and they made a couple of, I think 4 state championship appearances under him as either D coordinator or head coach. So Grant has a track record as well as doing really big things, and for a couple of years when he was down in Alabama. Now he's at East Hamilton, turned the offense over, and they've got a kid, Payne Zeller, at quarterback, who, East Hamilton is just the opposite of what we talked about with Tyner and Marion. They're not wing tee, punch you in the face. They're going to spread the field out 4 or 5 wide, throw it all over the field. They're looking to throw it for 300 or 400 yards a game. They've also got some good game breakers in the backfield. Is a good mix for them. Offensively, they can put a lot of points on the board, and Grant, kind of oversees the defense and has been for years, has a track record of being a really good defensive coach. So that's a really good combination for them. He's got the numbers are way up for East Hamilton now. Similar to what we said with Marion, that the enthusiasm's back up now. I think they are going to be one of our better, we consider the 4A and above, kind of the large schools in our area. I think East Hamilton's going to be one of the better up-and-coming programs because they're still relatively new school. So I really think that this could be kind of the start of some big years for them coming up.
Speaking of big, there's a big one in town, and that's Brentwood Academy and McCallie. We talked about McCallie. The other team everybody's excited about is Baylor. They play their first game this week in Division II. And going to be an interesting week in Chattanooga for those Division II larger schools.
Yeah, I mean, just the matchup BA coming into McCallie. I mean, we'll find out real quick, just exactly what McCallie's got coming back off last year's state championship team. They're going to get tested. It'll be a matchup probably statewide. A lot of folks watching because it's 2 top 5 type teams playing there. Baylor opens. They're at Division II AA, kind of an up and coming team in Chattanooga Christian, who every year tries to. They schedule Baylor and McCallie just kind of a measuring stick for them. They haven't really been able to compete as much with the larger schools in our area. But hats off to them for doing that. And Mark Mariakis is their coach, who took Ridgeland High School, which is just across the state line in Georgia for us, to a 4A championship a few years ago, and he's really building some big things for CCS. But it's a tall order for them to open their season against Baylor, which is a team that I think could really challenge McCallie for that Division II AAA, state championship caliber team. They've got a lot of talent coming back this season. I just really look for big things from Baylor, particularly offensively. They can put points on the board in a hurry. So I'm kind of anxious to see just what they look like coming in. This should be the season opener for them.
Yeah, you and me both. I'm excited to see what those guys look like this Friday. He is Stephen Hargis. He is with the Chattanooga Times Free Press. We appreciate him taking his time to be with us this week and throughout the season from time to time. And looking forward to, again, having him back. You're listening to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office.
Edition of Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office, who reminds you that there's no need to consult the playbook. The winning play is always designated sober driver. Fans, don't let fans drive drunk. I'm joined by Chris Eakes. Our producer is Jacob Underwood, and our show, Chris, goes across the state of Tennessee. Weather was really a problem. The games played, more than 100 teams still aren't playing football, Chris, and then I don't know how many of them played on Friday night because most got moved up to Thursday and some got moved to Saturday.
Yeah, a lot of moving around right now, Tim. Obviously, Jackson's going to start back next week. Still no word on Memphis, and essentially Metro at this point is not going to start back until after fall break, which basically the regular season's already over. So it's effectively canceled the season unless minds are changed there. So I'll just say that I did put out a tweet the other day, in response to Buck, in response to Shannon Terry and some others, that I'm not a huge fan of the answers that the mayor has given, and I'm certainly very hopeful that at some point people will come to their senses if in the next week or two we see the continued downtrend of everything, and these high school kids have been playing for at that point a month, and there's no major outbreaks, that people could say, okay, at least go play half a season or get some games in. But we'll see where they stand at this point. I mean, we could start opening up bars and everything else downtown, but we can't let high school kids that are the least affected by this terrible disease or virus get out there and at least try to play. So that's where I stand on it. I'm hopeful that people will come to their senses, and I hope the mayor in the future decides to give real answers and not hollow, shallow answers as he did last week.
The coaches in Metro got together on Friday, Chris, and really not only just coaches that aren't playing, but some coaches that are playing. It's really neat to see the Division II schools step up and say, we want these guys to be able to play.
Yeah, you look at what Coach Dilfer said and just how much it means to the development of these kids, the kids that will go on to play college football as well, and their need for that game tape. It pulls them out of tough situations in a lot of cases, especially in metro areas. There's that's just fact. And letting these kids go play is really, really important. And I'm hopeful that they'll get to put some stuff on tape here in the next few weeks. But I think it's important that everybody keeps letting their folks know And if you're in the national area, your representatives know that you need to play, you want to play, and keep up the pressure.
Chris, as we get into week 3, go ahead and give us your top 5 or so in each classification, and I'll just let you roll with it until you need me to do something, take a breath, and then I'll say something else.
Right. Yeah, if you see me go face down here on Zoom, you know I'm out of breath, and we'll need some help. So we'll start off in 1A, and we're going to go rather quickly across these. But in 1A, my top 5 this week is South Pittsburgh 1, Collinwood 2, Cofield 3, Huntington 4, and Huntland 5. And there are a lot of teams again in Memphis they're one of the teams that aren't playing in 2A and that sort of thing. So if they haven't played yet, I've for the most part kept them out of my opinion in my poll for the week. Moving up to 2A, Trenton Peabody number 1, no surprise there. Marion County, we'll talk to Stephen Hargis later in the show about just how good this Marion County team is, as is Meg's. Meg's a little bit better than I thought they would be after losing so much a year ago. Then I have Watertown, who's played a couple of close games in different classifications, and then I have Trousdale County, who had a nice bounce back win over White House this last week. In 3A, Alcoa, again, no surprise there. These other names you've heard of many times before, but I've got Red Bank, Covington, Westview, and then I added Fairview this week. Obviously, Procone hasn't played yet, and some of the others haven't played, and so that has an effect on that classification too. In 4A, Elizabethton, I've got number 1 this week. Hardin County, number 2 out in West Tennessee. Anderson County 3, despite a loss, 2-point loss to Powell, and we'll get into Powell in a minute. They're still in that top 5. Tullahoma makes their first appearance, and East Hamilton has looked really good early on. I've got them in at number 5. In Class 5A, Powell is number 1. They have played maybe the toughest schedule in the state, beating Anderson County and Beach both in close ball games down to the very end. But they won both of them, and so I've got them 1. I've got Beach 2, Henry County 3 after Henry County played Beach so well last week. Summit 4, and Knox Central. We have them in the 5th place slot there. In 6A, Maryville, Oakland, Ravenwood. Stop me if you've heard these before. Dobbins Bennett is off to a really good start, and then even though Brentwood lost to Brentwood Academy, I think they're one of the better teams in the state. You don't have a Cane Ridge, you don't have a Whitehaven playing, so right now you kind of got to take that next best. And for me, Tim, that's Brentwood. We can do Division II later in the show, but those are my top teams in the public school classification.
You mentioned Brentwood Academy and Brentwood, Chris. In these first week or two, it's been really good to see some of these crossover games from Division I, Division II playing each other, or some classifications. Powell, for example, in Anderson County, 5A and 4A games take place.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the time where you just have to make it work, and all these guys, some of them are getting, during the week of getting games. I mean, I think I saw CPA and Bartlett or somebody was going to play at Milan this upcoming week. I mean, you're literally trying to find anything and everything you can right now to keep your kids playing and get a ball games, even if it's not the greatest matchup for you. Doesn't really matter at this point. And at the same time, in some cases, you're having to play good teams because that's the only teams that are out there and available for the week. And it ends up giving us an opportunity to see some really good football being played.
Chris, some of those games are also been moved to schools that have turf fields, even though they're not kind of a neutral site.
Yeah, and for travel purposes and saving money and all of those things, you're seeing that a lot. And then, of course, with the weather we've had these first 2 weeks, Tim, you want to make sure that you aren't tearing up your field if you could find a place where you can go out and get on a turf field and not tear it up and give your chance to play on yours the whole season.
The Tennessee Highway Safety Office reminds you that drunk driving is the ultimate form of unsportsmanlike conduct. Fans, don't let fans drive drunk. You're listening to Tennessee Prep Weekly. Tennessee Highway Safety Office, who reminds you to designate a sober game plan. If you've been driving, don't. If you've been drinking, let me start again. In 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to this edition of Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office, who reminds you to designate a sober game plan. If you've been drinking, don't drive. Fans, don't let fans drive drunk. Casey Guest joins us from WCYB News 5, East Tennessee area. Casey, strange year, strange weather on this past weekend. Kind of bring us up to date a little bit on schools that are maybe not playing yet or just getting ready to play football because of the COVID.
Absolutely, yeah. Everybody in our area has played a game except for Unaka. I believe they're the only team that has not played a game yet in Northeast Tennessee. The only team currently dealing with COVID that we're aware of is Sullivan North. They have actually played 2 games. They played Thursday this past week and lost to Johnson County to fall to 0-2. Then the next day on Friday afternoon, the directors of school in Sullivan County sent out a letter saying that somebody in their football community had tested positive for COVID and that they were shut down from all football activities through September the 9th. So their game this coming Friday on the September the 4th against Cosby has been postponed. And then also their game on September 11th against Chucky Doak also will not be able to be played.
As I looked at the game with Daniel Boone and Greenville, Daniel Boone ended up winning the football game, but they were down 34-21 in the fourth quarter. Then Devin White goes down with an injury, and my gosh, how'd they bounce back to win that football game?
You know what? That was the one that sent kind of shockwaves through Upper East Tennessee on Friday night. You know, Greenville has been the most dominant team in our area for the last decade plus, winning 4 state championships. And, you know, when they have a 2-touchdown lead at home, you think that game is over. But, you know, Jackson Jenkins, the quarterback, helped bring that team back. You know, Page, one of their wide receivers, he had 3 touchdowns. And just a gutty effort by Jeremy Jenkins' team. Like you mentioned, when Devon White went down with an injury, he was one of their best running backs and linebackers, and they rallied around that. I mean, his senior leader goes down, and you come back on the road, and, you know, they lost week 1 to CAK, but it was a pretty close game. So Daniel Boone has a lot of seniors this year. That was a very impressive win, but it gets no easier for them because this week they're playing at Tennessee High in their region opener, and the Vikings were off last week, so they've had 2 weeks to get ready. That should be a really good game in Bristol on Friday.
Dobbins Bennett gets a nice win over Oak Ridge, 19-3. Oak Ridge, not a lot of offense. Was it Oak Ridge offense not very good, or Dobbins Bennett defensively that good?
I think the Dobbins Bennett defense is that good. I mean, I know Oak Ridge in week 1, they beat Hardin Valley, I think 40-0. And Dobbins Bennett, they shut out Tennessee High in week 1, 35-0. So the Indians have given up 3 points in 2 games, and they've both been road games. The Dobbins Bennett has not played a home game yet. This week they play Bearden, and that's a bit of an unknown for them because Bearden has not played yet this season. You know, they were shut down for their first 2 weeks because of COVID. So, you know, Dobbins Bennett doesn't know what they're getting with Bearden, but they are at home for their first time. And Dobbins Bennett's defense, I think, is just that good.
Go through Elizabethton a little bit. Awfully good football team, and they've just got a lot of experience back. Quarterback, offensive line, they look like they're loaded for bear one more time.
They are. I mean, you know, with everything that happened with COVID and guys not being able to practice and teams not being able to get together, when you bring back a quarterback and your entire offensive line, that puts you so far ahead. I think, and we talked to Sean Witten about that before the Science Hill game, you know, and he's like, the expectations are what we're, you know, trying to manage here because everybody's going to say, hey, if you don't score 14 points every quarter, what's wrong with your offense? Because you have so much back. You know, they have Parker Hughes, an unbelievable wide receiver, back as well. You know, that first game against Science Hill, they were challenged at the line of scrimmage a little bit in that one by Science Hill. But, you know, they pulled away and won that one 30-8, and then they scored a touchdown on every possession they had in the first half last week against Sullivan East. I think they won that game 58-7. So the Cyclones, they've won 17 in a row. They definitely appear to be heads and shoulders in 4A. You know, I mean, they could very easily, I could see them being back in Cookeville in December, lifting another gold ball.
I know you've seen Sullivan South and Cherokee play. Break those 2 ball clubs down.
Well, Sullivan South did not play in week 1. You know, they were in quarantine, so this was the first game they had, and we really didn't know what to expect. But I tell you what, they have their quarterback, Ethan Bergeron, a junior, is 6'3", 247. He looks like an offensive lineman out there, and they ran the ball just right down Cherokee's throat. They had a big line, some lead blockers. They looked very impressive. You know, Cherokee, their first game, they won 48-0 at Union County. They allowed 1 first down that entire game. And then this game against Sullivan South, they only had 3 first downs on offense. So I don't know what happened from one week to the next with them there, but Sullivan South punched them in the mouth. The Rebels looked really good. Their defense was impressive. I think Sullivan South, obviously, they're in the same region with Greenville and Elizabethton. So, you know, that is a very tough region. But Cherokee, I'm not really sure what to make of that when they win 48-0 one week and then lose 35-0 the next week.
We are talking with Casey Getz, and Casey, thanks so much again for taking the time. Something's got to give this week. Volunteer and David Crockett played. They've played 3 games between them, all 3 losses, and somebody has got to get on the W column at least this week.
They do. Actually, that is our TV game that we're broadcasting this week up in Northeast Tennessee. That game will air at 7:30 on Fox 39 this week. So myself and PJ Johnson, we're going to be calling that game. And, David Crockett, they have our area in Northeast Tennessee. They have the top recruit, Prince Colley. He's committed to Notre Dame. So very anxious and excited to see him in person for the first time this season. He is, they've struggled offensively a little bit so far, David Crockett. They scored 12 points on the road at Ooltewah and lost a close game in week 1. And then they scored 14 this past week and lost to Science Hill. So obviously, they had Cade Larkins graduate, who was such a great passer. I think he was second all time in the state of Tennessee in passing yards for a career. So hard to replace him. Volunteer, they played one game. They had a long lightning delay at halftime, and they were lost to Sullivan Central. I think they were only down a touchdown at halftime, ended up losing by 3 touchdowns. They have a new head coach in Jesse McMillan. So I'm not really sure, Volunteer only having one game and it was a little disrupted, but Crockett, it's going to be Prince Colley. I know they kind of moved him last year. He was receiver. They moved him to running back and also in the Wildcat this year just to get the ball in his hands more. But of course, he's going to Notre Dame to be outside linebacker, safety on that defensive side of the ball. So really looking forward to seeing him in person on Friday.
Science Hill obviously looking to keep their winning streak going after that win over Crockett last week. They've got Hardin Valley this week, a team that as you mentioned before, Oak Ridge put a lot of points on, and then it's Greenville for them after that at Greenville. They had that tough loss early to Elizabeth, and again, like you said, when you've got that much coming back, the expectation's pretty high there. But where does this Science Hill team fit in? Not only within their particular district, but also within the area.
I would say within the area, it seems to me like Elizabethton and Dobbins Bennett might be a notch above everybody else up in Upper East Tennessee. But Science Hill, they moved the ball in Elizabethton early. They had an interception. Then they had a fumble in their first 2 possessions. So, Jackson Diamond, they have a new starting quarterback this year. I think they might be a year away from being scary good. They have 32 juniors on their team this year, only 11 seniors. So, Stacey Carter said last year, one of their guys were sophomores. They took their lumps. I think they went 4-7 last year, losing in the first round. So those kids now are sophomores and juniors. So I think Science Hill, they're going to get better. Jackson Diamond can throw the ball. He had 4 touchdowns against David Crockett. I think Science Hill could be a sneaky team in that region. Also with Greenville, obviously maybe they aren't maybe what they had been 2-3 years ago. But again, they've only played one game so far, and they did have that lead late. So anxious to see. That'll be a very interesting game in 2 weeks when Science Hill goes down to Greenville about that one. But I think Science Hill could have a pretty good season this year.
Well, you mentioned Unique and I having played yet. Neither has Morristown East, and this week it's Cherokee facing off against a team that got literally no film on. They get the unenviable task of trying to figure that out. But how do you see this particular game going this week, especially as Cherokee has been so great one week and not so great the next?
Yeah, I really talked to their coach, Jason Lawson, and that's even a story in of itself. I mean, he's the girls basketball coach at Cherokee, and they had Cody Baugh, the head coach. He resigned in late July. So they called Coach Lawson and said, would you be interested in being the head coach, for this season? And he said, absolutely. He had been an assistant several years ago. So, the way they looked in week 1, it was like, wow, this could be a really surprise team. But he told us, they played Sullivan South in week 2, and that was their first game. So they had no film on them. And he's like, now we're going to go through that again in week number 3, playing Morristown East. He's like, you're supposed to, all the unknowns are supposed to be gone after week 1. He's like, for us, though, we're going to have that for the first 3 weeks. So I honestly have no idea what Morristown East has. But Cherokee, they have Trent Price, running back. He had 132 yards against Union County. He had, I think, 9 yards against Sullivan South. They got to get the running game going to be successful, I think, against Morristown East.
Yep, and really interesting in that 3A classification, Region 1. We got about 30 seconds. Who would you say is the favorite in with North Green, West Green, and Chucky Doak, Unicoi Johnson, and Claiborne?
I would say Chucky Doak. They've only played one game. They played Knox Catholic, and they lost pretty good. But I mean, there's no shame in that. They were off last week, but they have a quarterback back, Matthew Palazzo. I think Chucky Doak's the favorite in Region 1 3A.
He's Casey Getz, sports director at News 5 WCYB, and we appreciate him taking the time. We're going to take a quick break and come back with more. You're listening to Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office here on our statewide radio network.
Back into Tennessee Prep Weekly, brought to you each week by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office, who reminds you that drunk driving is the ultimate form of unsportsmanlike conduct. Fans don't let fans drive drunk. Joined, of course, by Chris Eakes. Throughout the program, Chris, we've heard a lot about weather, about COVID, about good teams and teams that are struggling a little bit. We went through in the opening, your Division I top 5 teams. Let's go ahead and get you started on Division II top 5 teams.
Well, you and I talked during one of the breaks about a team in Division I Single A, and that's Middle Tennessee Christian. I've got them ranked 5th and in the classification after a big convincing win over Friendship Christian a week ago. Got to see them play. Really do have a number of very good players on that football team and a very, very good quarterback. They're going to be there all year and will vie for a semifinal spot. Number 1, I've got Davidson Academy, 2-time defending, reigning, and favorite for the year. But USJ is right there on their heels and may be just as good. We'll see. They played a pretty good ball game a year ago, at least most of it was. Then I have Kings Academy, and then I have Middle Tennessee Christian. CPA in Division II AA, I have them as number 1. I have Evangelical Christian number 2, and Knoxville Grace number 3. Knoxville Grace looking good early. In Division II AAA, McCallie, very convincing win this last week. I've got them at number 1. Brentwood Academy at number 2, also a good win over Brentwood. And finally, Baylor, who hasn't played a game, but they will this week. And I think those 3 teams are your teams that will most likely compete for the state championship.
For all the circumstances that we mentioned before, the body of work to be able to look at, Chris, to judge these teams this early in the season, a little bit less than what you typically have.
Yeah, actually, we had a bad internet connection, Tim, so I'm going to ask you to ask the question again.
Okay. All right, Chris, we're getting ready to start region play, but the body of work to rank the teams or get ready for region is a little bit less than it typically is because of COVID, because of no 7-on-7 this week, no spring practice. How difficult it is for you and other talking heads to come up with accurate assessment of teams so far this year?
It's impossible. I mean, look, we can go off scores and we can do these pieces and parts, but you're going to sit there and tell me, like, for example, Pearl Cone's not the number 2 team in 3A if they're playing? Of course they are. And Whitehaven's not in the top 5 in 6A if they're playing? Of course they are. And you can go across the board and do that. And so I think it's very, very challenging to do. And but at the same time, it's fun because you get to, for me, it makes me pay a little bit more attention to some of the scores and outcomes than normally you would focus in on. And so it keeps me a little bit more sharp to do it. But I enjoy it. And I get to, we get so many great people to talk to on here, Tim, every week that, I have a good feeling of what we're talking about by the end of the show when it's time to do some of this stuff. So I feel real comfortable just by having those conversations with all our media folks getting kind of confirmation of what I'm seeing as far as the outcomes are concerned.
We are getting ready for region play. Chris, explain a little bit the difference between region play and non-region play, obviously, because now the way it's worked in TSSAA, the region play is what counts getting you into playoffs.
You don't want to go back to the Z plan, Tim?
No.
Me neither. Those were some tough broadcasts on Saturday mornings, but it's everything, right? And what it did was it allowed us to get back and play really good football teams in your non-region schedule and get ready for your region schedule for those that don't play a full 9 or 10 game schedule out of your region. So it all matters. Now it matters. You're playing for seeding in the playoffs. You're playing for home field advantage depending on where you're at and how games play out in the playoffs. And at the end of the day, your region games are what will determine where you start the playoffs or if you even make the playoffs. So these games are everything.
COVID has brought some really strange things. There are at least one team, probably a few more, that are choosing to play only the region schedule as opposed to whatever else and so forth. And then you get into the region where you've got 3 teams that are playing and 4 teams that are not, and how that's going to work itself out.
Yeah, that's the tough one, right? I mean, you're going to have a lot of open dates for those teams. And it's something I thought about too, because the first week my son's team went and played a team in Trousdale that's obviously not in their district. And they're a very different model. They're a public school, not a private school. And what are the benefits of playing in a district where the coaches can come together and kind of try to control environments and all of those things? And again, I think it's one of those situations where there's no right answer. I think the answer is whatever we make it, and whatever we can do to make it through the year, that's what matters.
The one thing I know, because I've got a teacher in my family that's still out there, teachers are earning their money this year. Coaches are really earning their money this year in a different kind of a way.
Yes, they are, and it is trying to do something that you never thought would happen or never entered your mind. Like, I'm gonna have to wear a mask on the sideline in the open daylight and clean air, and you're gonna make me, and it's 100,000 degrees, and I'm gonna wear a mask? Are you kidding? And that's just the smallest of things, right? And trying to keep these kids healthy. So it's really been beyond, not just beyond normal, but never could have imagined or dreamed some of these items or potential things they have to go through.
This edition of Tennessee Prep Weekly has been brought to you by the Tennessee Highway Safety Office. For Chris Eakes, intern Josh Cummins, and our producer Jacob Underwood, this is Tim Tackett, reminding you we'll be back next week at this time for more Tennessee Prep Weekly.